The US election is now just 1 month away. Which of these two candidates, Trump or Harris, do you trust to bring peace to the Middle East? Hello and welcome to the Nexus. It's a really crucial question. Who is more capable of ending the Israel-Gaza war, which has now been going on for an entire year? Trump supporters say he's the only one who makes America feared and respected on the world stage. And he even boasts himself he'd end it quickly. Harris supporters, on the other hand, say she's better able to work with allies and has the better temperament. Our foreign policy experts are similarly divided. That debate coming up in a minute. But first, here's a quick look at where Trump and Harris stand on the Middle East.
The United States recognizes Israel's absolute right to defend itself. My message today is very simple. If you want Israel to survive, you need Donald J. Trump as the 47th president of the United States. November 5th will be the most important day in the history of our country. I think it will also be the most important day in the history of Israel.
The big question, what stance will Kamala Harris take on Israel?
From when I was a young girl, collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time in the United States Senate and now at the White House, I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel. I am unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself.
She hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu.
That's absolutely not true.
It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Mr. President, this will be remembered by our people throughout the ages.
You know, I did have a bad experience with Israel, though, when we took out Soleimani. I'll never forget that Bibi Netanyahu let us down. The night before it happened, I got a call that Israel will not be participating in this attack.
Mr. Trump, has your relationship with the Prime Minister repaired at all?
No, it was never bad. I would say it was always good. No president has done what I've done for Israel, and we've always had a very good relationship.
This quote from Walter Russell Mean in the Wall Street Journal saying that tensions between Bibi Netanyahu and Kamala Harris.
Welcome, Mr. Prime Minister.
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people?
Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles.
U.S. elections don't just have great consequences for our country, they can have great consequences globally.
Where each candidate stands on the Israel-Hamas war.
Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters. I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza. It is time for this war to end, and I will not be silent.
This is a little bit like two kids fighting in the schoolyard. So you have a war that's going on, and you're probably going to have to let this play out because a lot of people are dying.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started.
I remain committed to a path forward that can lead to a two-state solution. We must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security.
It's been the clearest distillation yet that we've seen of Vice President Harris's own belief and views on this situation.
I was saddened by the fate of the Palestinian people. They deserve a far better life. There is no hatred like the Palestinian hatred of Israel and Jewish people, and probably the other way around also.
I'm clear-eyed. Iran is a destabilizing, dangerous force in the Middle East.
I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah.
President Trump is slamming President Biden's comments last week, where Biden opposed Israel attacking Iran's nuclear sites.
They asked him, "What do you think about Iran? Would you hit Iran?" And he goes, "As long as they don't hit the nuclear stuff." That's the thing you want to hit, right? I said, I think he's got that one wrong.
Well, we're about to bring in our three American analysts, but first, let's hear from some people in the region itself. What do they make of the candidates?
لكن ترامب شيء جيد انه يحسم الاشياء كما حسمها في العراق باغتيال السليماني على سبيل المثال مثلا.
اولا السياسه الامريكيه ثابته بالنسبه للشرق الاوسط عموما. ثابته لا تتغير بتغير الرؤساء وبتغير الاحزاب التي تحكم امريكا.
فبايدن ولا اي انسان اذا ما هو نفس التعامل حيكون بفكره اليهودي الصهيوني القائم على العنصريه بالتعامل مع الدول العربيه.
I hope that Kamala Harris is sharp enough to understand what's going on in the Middle East, because Biden was sharp enough, although he's old and everything, but he's sharp enough. Trump is sharp enough.
Okay, let's bring in our guests now. And today we have Matthew Bartlett, who worked at the State Department during the Trump administration. Victor LaGroon, a former military intelligence officer and Biden appointee for Veterans Affairs. And finally, Stephen Semler, a foreign policy writer and journalist. Welcome to the program, all three of you. We're a little tight for time, so I'm going to ask you to be concise. Matthew Bartlett, you support Trump over Harris when it comes to the Middle East. Why?
Well, President Trump, for the better part of a decade, has always been a bit of a wild card, so to say, and that certainly applies to foreign policy. You have seen, as a candidate, making almost inflammatory comments, originally around a proposed Muslim ban. Yet when he came into power, his first trip was to the region to build a coalition to fight ISIS. He was pronounced against the Iraq war. He is often a voice for restraint. And when it comes to the Middle East, he has a record of building peace, of working diplomacy, every single lever of diplomacy, including commercially, and recently talking about what life could be like in Gaza with peace. So again, this is a candidate, a former president who is not afraid to use harsh rhetoric, who is often at times not willing to start international matters, but also not willing to take international matters. Remember, this is a president that took out General Soleimani. Yet again, his natural state, his natural inclinations are for restraint, are for peace. He is the only American president in this century to have less military engagement. I think that is his mindset, yet there is also a real politique to him. So whether it comes to Israel and Iran, Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Gaza, I believe he is looking to both confront some of the terrorist activity as well as start some of the peace process.
Okay.
He's not afraid to talk.
Matthew, thank you. Time's up. Victor LaGroon, we'll get to your candidate in a minute, but first of all, your opportunity to respond to Matthew.
Well, I mean, I think Matthew really did make some serious points, and one of which is that Trump is well known for his rhetoric. He's also known for being erratic. None of those things lead to stability through the eyes and the lens of our international partners. I think that when we look at the Middle East, we've had significant challenges in the Middle East almost since the beginning of Israel's development. With that being said, the American people in the United States has always stood with the Israelis. So we do have some challenges as it pertains to if former President Trump becomes president again. I think that there's some serious concern within our allies to whether or not he will stand with NATO, if he will work with our other allies to be a disruptor, or will he be someone who could actually lead, bring peace to the Middle East? So there's still a lot to see, a lot of concern, obviously, from some of his national security folks from before. So we'll see.
Stephen Semler, how do you rate Trump?
About the same as I do Harris. The daylight between Republicans and Democrats is noticeable on domestic policy. On foreign policy, there's hardly any daylight. In the Middle East, for example, both Trump and Biden have given Israel essentially carte blanche to do whatever it would like. Trump recognized the Golan Heights as official Israeli territory, recognized Jerusalem as the capital, adhering to Israeli wishes, and Biden has continued both of those things. Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in accordance to Israel's wishes. Biden hasn't rejoined it in according to Israel's wishes. And just this year, after Israel was charged with genocide and after the ICJ advanced the genocide case against Israel, Biden approved a record amount of military aid to Israel. It was higher than after the Egypt-Israel peace agreement in 1979, and it was higher than the October War, 1973. So moving forward, I don't see much opportunities for peace in the Middle East unless the Palestine question is resolved, and neither candidate, whether it's Biden, Harris, or Trump, seem interested in resolving that question.
Victor, the Biden-Harris administration has asked Netanyahu for a ceasefire. They asked them not to go into Lebanon to tackle Hezbollah. And yet, as that 60 Minutes reporter, Bill Whitaker, pointed out, he's ignoring them. And he asks, do you not have any sway over Netanyahu? So is that true, then, that Netanyahu doesn't listen to Biden and Harris?
Well, I think what we see is that Netanyahu is on his own sheet of music. He is doing what he thinks is in the best interest of the Israeli people and their survival. But what that does is create some level of conflict between the Biden-Harris administration and Netanyahu's plans for combat on the ground. We see that he is now fighting on several fronts. The Department of Defense Secretary has said, hey, are you capable of defending yourself? And if not, what is the plan? What is the strategy? And because Netanyahu has chosen to go on their own and do his own course of action, that's left the U.S. government in a significant challenge.
Well, look, so the thing is, it's the Biden-Harris administration that's giving the money and giving the weapons and giving, presumably, tacit support. So why isn't he held to account by Biden and Harris? Why isn't he told, if you don't do that, there'll be an embargo, an arms embargo?
I think a big part of it is because it's the political season. So the president cannot appear to be not supportive or unsupportive of Israel. So right now, Biden is he's in a tight spot.
And
he
yet,
cannot really challenge him.
And yet a very recent poll says that 8 out of 10 voters in swing states want an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
I agree. But again, this is still a political season, and this is still close to an election. And unfortunately, President Biden knows that anything he does outside of the bounds will certainly not bode well for the Democrats, because Republicans, rightfully so, would use it against them.
Matthew, do you think that Netanyahu doesn't respect Biden and Harris, and would he be any different with Trump?
It's clear right now. Jake Sullivan is asking the Israelis, what are you going to do with response to Iran? And they clearly don't know. And it's unclear if they're going to get answers. Like it or not, President Trump, again, there was a notion of he's unpredictable on the global stage. That's absolutely correct. And if you look at the records, they are not the same. They are vastly different. You had a President Trump come in supporting Israel while also establishing a coalition in the region while advancing peace in the Abraham Accords versus, a huge crack in the Middle East. I question what people would be saying if these records were reversed. If that under President Trump, you had nothing but a raging war in the Middle East, and under President Biden, you had peace processes, I doubt people would be saying, yes, they are similar. These are vastly different approaches in styles of diplomacy, and certainly in the real world results. So it is unclear. President Trump is not going to show his hand, but like it or not, he is either respected or feared, by leaders in the region.
Now, a final question before you go. President Biden was asked recently if he felt that Bibi Netanyahu was actually trying to put pressure and damage the Democrats at the election by not getting on with that ceasefire. Let's have a listen to that.
Do you have any worries that Netanyahu may be trying to influence the election, and that's why he has not agreed to a diplomatic solution?
No administration has helped Israel more than I have. None. 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 And I think Bibi should remember that.
Stephen, do you actually think that Netanyahu is prosecuting the war in the way that he is in order to hurt the Democrats' chances at the election?
It's possible, and the problem as I see it is Biden doesn't seem to care. If the Biden-Harris administration wanted a ceasefire, which is extremely popular among the U.S. electorate, they would enforce an arms embargo on Israel, which is also extremely popular among the American electorate. More than 6 out of 10 voters in the U.S. want an arms embargo on Israel, including nearly 8 out of 10 Democrats. So Biden is possibly throwing this election for the sake of one guy.
Victor, your answer?
Yeah, I certainly think that there's a really good chance that Netanyahu has listened to Donald Trump after he came and met with Congress and said, hey, I'm going to support what you want to do and hitch my wagon to your agenda. And unfortunately, that does not bode well for the Democrats.
Final answer, Matthew?
You know, with all due respect to Stephen and Victor, I think that's a little bit of a cynical idea. The notion of dealing with a long-standing, regional, raging war that is somehow being driven by American electoral politics is almost preposterous and beyond the pale. This is a very nuanced situation. I respect people's opinions, but let's just be clear here. You know, this is a serious situation in the Middle East. I do not believe that anybody is doing anything designed to affect American political outcomes.
Matthew Bartlett, Victor LaGroon, and Stephen Semler, thank you all very much for your contributions today. Much appreciated. Coming up on the Nexus, boycotting Israel. How has the so-called BDS movement hit American companies operating in the Middle East? But first, London is one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. Who do people here favour?
Do you think Donald Trump or Kamala Harris is more likely to end the conflict in the Middle East?
I feel like Trump. He's been president before, and I feel like from what I've seen on social media and whatnot, he didn't have many conflicts. He sorted it with China and Russia, whatever. I feel like he'd probably be more likely to sort in the Middle East, as Kamala Harris was like vice president until now. She didn't really sort much, so I feel like Trump might be better.
Kamala Harris comes across as someone who actually has a heart and a soul. So I feel like she would make more of an impact in that area for reasons that wouldn't necessarily be for her own monetary benefit.
I think most likely it would be her. Because I think she will continue to have a balanced foreign policy.
No Harris, no Trump, free Palestine.
I don't think either of them would, to be perfectly honest. I think that both of them have got incredibly vested interests in Israel and the genocide that they're committing at the moment. So, to be perfectly honest, I think that there's no lesser of the two evils in this situation for a lot of the Palestinian people and obviously the Lebanese people now as well.
Trump, I think he's just going to hardball it. He's going to have a strong hand on everything. He's going to tell Israel and Palestine, you mess around, I'll bomb you too.
Well, whoever wins the election in November, they'll have to deal with the BDS movement, which seeks to financially and in other ways isolate Israel. We'll be discussing that in a moment with one of the Palestinian organisers here in the UK. But first, here's a look at what the movement's been up to over the past year.
Boycott, Divest, Sanction. The BDS movement was formed to end Israel's occupation of Palestine. It targets companies linked to Israel using 3 main tactics. B is for boycotts of Israeli goods.
These products are funding the Israeli genocide.
The D stands for divestment, or pulling investment from companies seen to be involved in the Israeli occupation. And the S is for sanctions, aimed directly at Israel and its government.
Stop sending arms to Israel! Stop buying arms from Israel! Boycott Israel!
Since the war on Gaza, activists worldwide renewed calls for boycotts and sanctions against Israel, arguing that this non-violent approach played a major role in ending apartheid in South Africa.
The movement became particularly visible during the global university campus protests, which saw students around the world demand their institutions pull investment from and break links with Israel. But is the campaign working? 3 of the biggest brands impacted by the BDS campaign are McDonald's, Starbucks and Coca-Cola. Starbucks' international profits have dropped by 23% so far in 2024. And they've closed stores in Egypt, Kuwait, Oman, Lebanon and Jordan. But 50 new locations opened in Saudi Arabia in the past year. The Starbucks boycott came as a result of a union dispute and links the previous CEO, Howard Schultz, has to Israel.
Starbucks Workers United posted in solidarity with Palestine. Starbucks, the company itself, did not like that and sued the union. Now, many people were not happy with this and started making videos about why people should consider boycotting Starbucks.
McDonald's has faced similar protests and calls for a boycott. Mice painted in the colours of the Palestinian flag were released by protesters in one branch.
The burger chain became a target after photos and videos on social media showed franchise stores in Israel giving away thousands of free meals to the members of the Israeli military.
McDonald's global sales have declined for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, with its net profit down 12% compared to the same period last year. Coca-Cola's sales are also down in the Middle East.
We are boycotting because Coca-Cola operates on illegal Israeli settlements.
Reports also state that the volume of Coke sold in Egypt declined by double-digit percentage points in the 6 months to June. Overall, Western beverage brands suffered a 7% sales decline in the first half of the year across the region. Rather than directly blame the BDS movement, some multinationals refer only to vague geopolitical tensions or macroeconomic headwinds as the reason for their financial struggles. Some US members of Congress, belonging to the so-called Squad, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib, have also supported the methods of BDS, boycotting the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, when he visited the US before the war in Gaza, and supporting the idea of sanctions against US weapons sales to Israel.
Congress has to block arms sales which are inconsistent with established US and international law.
Pro-Israel organisations such as the Anti-Defamation League accuse the BDS movement of anti-Semitism, which it denies. In 2019, the US Senate actually passed an anti-BDS law, and since then, 38 US states have enacted laws against boycotts. Last week, the US House of Representatives voted on the Anti-BDS Labelling Act. The bill requires products from large portions of Palestine, including illegal settlements in the West Bank, to be labelled Made in Israel.
Let's be clear. A vote for this bill would further support the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. A yes vote for this bill is erasing the existence of Palestinians.
Well, our final guest is Professor Kamel Hawwash. He is the former chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which is the main organisation in the UK that promotes BDS. Welcome to the programme. Let me ask you, Israel is still prosecuting its war in Gaza and in Lebanon. It's taking on Iran. Has the BDS movement made any difference whatsoever?
Well, I believe that this Palestinian call, and it is for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, has been another dimension that people could look to show their absolute disgust with what Israel is doing. So they've been on massive marches in the UK, and I've led quite a lot of these in London over the years. There have been 20 of them. They've written to their MPs. The government here in the UK hasn't really changed its position to what is absolutely necessary, i.e. to stop the killing. So people have found that they can themselves do something by boycotting certain products, including, for example, McDonald's and Starbucks and so on, but also to join in the boycott that the BDS movement calls for of major companies that are complicit in what Israel has been doing over years.
How would you measure the success of the movement, though? Do you have any metrics?
Well, I think a few years ago, Yair Lapid, one of the Israeli politicians, estimated its economic impact at something like $5 billion. That's quite a lot of money. But it is also the fact that when people hear you're boycotting a company and they ask you why, you can use it to explain what Israel has been doing, again, since before the 7th of October, even though that's an important date. And that by buying goods from the Israeli settlements, for example, you are sustaining them. You are making sure they continue when everyone believes they must go for there to be peace between Palestinians and Israelis.
What happens when the produce from the illegal settlements in the West Bank are labelled as made in Israel? I mean, it's halfway through that law in the United States. If you boycott that produce, aren't you then hurting Palestinians in the West Bank?
Well, Israel uses this argument to say that you shouldn't boycott it because it'll impact on Palestinians. If they just allowed the Palestinian economy to grow without interfering, without withholding tax money, there would be no need for them to work in the illegal settlements. They're really forced to do that because of the dire economic situation in the Palestinian controlled areas. So leave the Palestinians alone, let the economy grow, don't withhold their money, don't obstruct the export of the goods and fruit and so on, and don't label your own products produced illegally in these settlements as made in Israel, where some people may think, yeah, I'll buy things from Israel. In fact, they're not from Israel, they're from stolen land.
Yes, and just a final question for you. Obviously, the BDS movement does also cover academia. Some Israeli academics have pointed out that many of them are sort of liberal and actually don't support the war at all, and they prefer a ceasefire. And one of them has actually written that such BDS movement betrays values we all hold dear: freedom of expression, tolerance, equality, justice, and peace. A boycott of Israeli academics and institutions, therefore, is contrary to the core principles of academic freedom. As an academic yourself, do you have any sympathy with that?
The BDS movement, it doesn't target individuals, but it actually targets individuals at institutions who are carrying out work with complicit organizations or even with the Israeli government. So while I understand what this person is saying, if he looks at what the BDS demands, it's an end to the occupation. It is for equal treatment of Palestinian and Israeli citizens of Israel, and for the promotion of the right of return. Nobody who is serious about peace can disagree with these.
Kamel Hawwash, thank you so much for your contributions today to the Nexus. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.